Good evening. Welcome to Firebase. I'm your host, Gary French. We are in the political season, in case you haven't been keeping up with everything. It seems we've got a lot of people running for office. Recently, Jonathan and I had a chance to go out to the Owen County GOP Lincoln Day dinner. Had an opportunity to speak with a lot of people out there and got a lot of good video shots, a lot of commentary from the folks that were out there. And let me tell you, even though we were at a GOP event, folks were energized about what they felt was absolutely vital. We talked with people over there and we just asked them questions like this. What are you looking for in a candidate? The responses were impressive, to say the least. And they would tell us, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the values that are important. And we even heard from one or two people, they say, we're just not happy with what's happening right now. And they're hoping for change, not change for the sake of wholesale change. They're hoping that they can see some positive changes. Some of the people we spoke to were absolutely adamant about their values and their core beliefs. We spoke with one person, a pastor, and he shared with us what was important to him. Let's listen to what he has to say. What are two or three either characteristics or something about the individual that you're looking for who is running for office? What would be the top three things on your list? Say this person not only merits my vote, but merits my consideration before I do cast my vote.
I mean, I don't want to ever discount being able to be personable, relatable, but I don't just want someone that's relatable and gets it, understands the problems, but I want someone that has answers. So to be relationally brilliant, to be brilliant and relational, maybe is a better way to say that, is probably tantamount to me.
Right.
When I say being able to have answers, but to be able to relate those to you in a way that you not only understand what they're saying, but you believe what they're saying.
Awesome.
They can make this happen.
Yeah.
This is not just fluff.
Right.
These are actual answers. Transparency as an individual. Not here's who I am in front of the camera. Here's what I want you to think. Here's who I really am. And that should come through in just a conversation with you.
What do you think are some of the biggest dangers that's facing not only Kentucky, but our nation today?
Now, this is going to be from a pastor's perspective, obviously. One of the biggest, maybe the greatest struggle we're going to have is morality. Now, I know that sounds, duh. We have a generation now that has been brought up in school systems, pardon me, and brought up with secular theology, where they have no moral absolutes. Everything is relative, and you see that especially now with the questioning of gender and other things that are going on in our society. And my concern is where we are morally in the next 20 to 30 years. Now, as a pastor, I'm praying for revival, and I think it's always darkest for the dawn, that great things happen in the midst of great turmoil. But that is, by far, probably to me, the greatest issue that I see us having. Now, you and I, we might not be the exact same age. You're probably 4 or 5 years older than me. But we share,
at least.
we share the same moral worldview. Now, I know that's biblical. I get that. But our biblical worldview and the world's moral view often are aligned. And for years, they were very much aligned. And now everything's up.
I really enjoyed speaking with Pastor Jeremy, and he's absolutely right. We do share a lot of the same morality. And for me, it's not just sharing a moral position. It's a biblical worldview. I think most of you who are watching our show could agree with that. What's important is not just our political view or some kind of a personal view or any kind of bias that we might have. It's whether or not, as Christians, we take that reality of our faith and we see it introduced into our daily life, into the marketplace, but especially into the political realm. We had a chance to speak with Pastor Jeremy about a few other things, but one of the issues that came up that was important to him, as I know it's important to you because I've heard from you, is the idea, or the issue of immigration. Listen to this part of the conversation. How big an issue is it, not just for our nation, but for Kentucky and Owen County, if you want to think about that, of an open border. I know that could be and it's not intended to be a loaded question.
No. It's not. It's a fair and it's a very good question to ask, especially for someone here in rural Kentucky, which is already rural by most standards.
Yeah.
I go back to the breakdown of our moral principles. When you have an open border where people are allowed to flood through without any legitimate plan for their well-being, other than we're going to let them into the country and then see what happens, that sounds a lot like a gamble to me.
Right.
And it's a huge risk because there's no way you're vetting everybody that's coming through that border. It's impossible to do that with things as they are. What happens then is you have an opportunity. One, you do have an opportunity with folks who come into the country, come into your community, to try to take advantage of the opportunity to be a blessing to them. But these people are so far behind the eight ball when they get here, it's unfair.
Do we allow the narrative to be controlled? Especially as a Christian, we often allow non-believers to define what it means to be a believer in Jesus Christ. But do you think that sometimes we allow people who are for an open border to control the narrative by saying we don't want immigration, or that we're haters, or if we, as an example, if we stand for biblical values of a man and a woman, there are just two genders.
Right.
The Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina made that very clear. Do you think we allow other people to control the narrative, and we say we don't want to be called a hater, we don't want to be called people that don't want immigration, and we want to be kind and loving? Why do you think that happens like that?
Part of the issue there is the control of media sources by secular worldviews, or people with secular worldviews. I mean, let me clarify that.
Right.
We, as believers, we're not disconnected from the political discourse, and nor should we be. I'm saying I don't think we are as much as it may appear. I'm saying that it appears we are because we don't have the open door with most media outlets to be able to discuss our views, because our views are being pushed back, trying to be stifled or
if open borders are so wonderful, the next time you go to the mall, leave your car unlocked.
Absolutely.
With the key in the ignition
absolutely.
Or the key fob there.
Again, we allow children to tell parents what they want to do with their life, and we are not doing children a favor by doing that. We are doing them a disservice when we allow someone to come into the greatest country on earth and not be afforded the basic information, if you will,
exactly,
and give them a leg up. Capitalism is not evil, sir.
Right.
Capitalism is not evil.
Exactly.
There are evil people in capitalist countries, but there are evil people in communist countries and good people in communist countries.
Friends, whether you agree with Pastor Jeremy or not, or even with myself, that's not necessarily the issue here. The issue is whether or not you believe or agree with the Bible. I found it very, should I say, apropos that he would talk about moral principles directing us in the openness of our borders. And if you heard in the conversation correctly, we sometimes allow other people to define what it really means to be a Christian. We even allow people who are not conservative to define what it means to be a conservative. I think that's wrong. I think that's something that we shouldn't do. We shouldn't be changing definitions in the middle of our life to try to fit into a certain narrative. Pastor Jeremy was talking about there's a control of the narrative, and we do allow the control of the narrative, especially for core values, core principles. Let me share something with you that goes in line exactly with what Pastor Jeremy was talking about. The most popular medical textbook publisher in the world was triggered after the Florida Surgeon General referenced the definition of gender dysphoria. And they were talking about the reason they weren't going to allow the education of you choose your gender to the little children, because in the medical textbook it was saying gender dysphoria. And gender dysphoria is not saying that your birth is assigned, your gender, your sex is assigned at birth, but it's that you are born biologically a certain way. Well, what Pastor Jeremy was talking about is that with an open border or with allowing other people to control the narrative, we are allowing our moral principles to be predicated upon people that hold worldviews that are in stark contrast and the exact opposite of what it is that we say that we believe. It's important that you and I take the time to stand firm on biblical values. And we do that not from a position of hatred, but we do that from the position of knowing that our lives have been radically changed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. There are big issues that are confronting us, and every one of us has the chance and the opportunity to vote. Let's not forsake not just the assembling of ourselves together for worship. Let's not forsake the God-given and the Constitution guaranteed right of voting according to a biblical worldview. And friends, if we hope to see moral principles come back to our nation, we have to do it by not allowing the narrative of our faith to be controlled by non-believers. And we have to make sure that we vote. When we get back from this short break, we'll talk to a few others about what was going on at that dinner. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This next segment, we're talking with a retired banker from Owen County. His name is Dallas Stafford. Dallas was saying that one of the things that you need to do in voting, you need to take the emotion out of your decision and look at the facts, look at the candidate. Let's listen to what Mr. Stafford had to say. What are you looking for in a candidate without telling us who you're voting for or anything? And if you want to tell us who you're voting for, that's fine. But when you're looking at a candidate and you're considering whether or not that person deserves your vote, what do you look for, Dallas?
First of all, I try to take out the emotions. I try to deal with facts. I look for people who are good managers, people that have experience. Look for people that are conservative, do good financial management and physical management of whatever they're operating with, or whatever government or entity they're operating with.
You know, back in 2008, there's a candidate that ran for president. In my opinion, ended up being one of the worst presidents outside. The one that's in office now, in my opinion, is the worst president in the history of our nation, at least in my lifetime. But he spoke a lot about hope and change back in 2008. And both he and his wife were basically saying they wanted to fundamentally change the United States of America. And the change that's going on that I see right now is that we are allowing the republic to slip away from us to become that of almost like a third world country socialist banana republic. Here's the question. Why have we allowed that to happen?
That's a good question. I think we need to be more involved, because the question I would have if a candidate says we need change, my question would be, what kind of change?
That's a great response. I hear people talk about change, and I do the same thing. Okay, what are you talking about? When they talk about change and they're not willing to indicate the change, for me, that's a red flag that goes up
Absolutely.
On that. The candidates on the Republican ticket that are running, what are you looking for in them? Ideas or thoughts, or what kind of direction would you like to see them go in?
I'm looking for someone who's conservative on their approach to government. I like less government rather than more government.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, folks. Amen. I've got to say that. Amen to that.
And I think it's important, too, for a county like Owen County, that we're a rural county. We have limited resources, a smaller tax base. So what's really important is that whomever it is that's elected needs to be able to go outside the county and get dollars and bring dollars in, grant money in.
Right.
Right. We don't have to increase the taxes of our local folks.
Who do you like running for governor? I've had Mike Harmon on the show a couple of times, and I got to tell you, I like Mike. I like Mike Harmon. He's a solid Christian. He is, from what I've seen and discovered, he's a solid conservative. And
Yes.
You know, without saying, of course, I'm endorsing him, and I'm not asking you on that, but
Yes, sir.
what are you looking for in somebody that's running for governor?
I think it's important for me to find someone that is willing to be real, to be honest, to be open-minded, and someone that's not trying to feather their own nest. And that happens so much in government.
How is it that you and I will elect people to office and they retire multi-millionaires? And you and I, as the taxpayer, we've seen little return on.
Yes.
We've seen little return on our investment.
Yes.
Why is that so? Is that the system we've set up and we just refuse to change it?
Yes. Well, sometimes they forget that the people elected them to office and the responsibility that they have to do the job that they were elected to. And so I think that's part of the problem, is that they forget once they're there, and then the goal becomes to some, we need to find the best way to get elected next time. It's not to serve the people, but it's how do I get elected, and I work from one cycle to the other.
Well, that's right.
When I grew up, we used to forget the D or the R or the I behind the name after they were elected.
Exactly.
But we don't do that anymore. People campaign every year, all the way through, from one cycle to the other.
Did you ever see it so hyper partisan?
Yes,
in our society? It's like, and I'll just have to say it. There's a segment of the Democrat Party that talks about tolerance.
Yes, sir.
But for those of us that are Christian conservatives, they're not tolerant to us at all.
That's right. That's right. I think we as Christians need to demand good Christian leaders, and because the way to get them out, if they don't change, then we'll vote them out. They can't stay, and we can turn the government around that way, I think.
Awesome. Wow, did you hear that? Mr. Stafford was saying that you need to be involved and you have to take the emotions out of the situation. This next young man that we spoke to is T.J. Roberts. He is the president of Kentucky Liberty, an impressive young man. Listen to what he has to say about how you can take a stand right here in Kentucky. Joined right now with T.J. Roberts.
Yes, sir. And
I want you to tell our audience a little bit about the organization. I found it very fascinating what you were telling me about the work that you're doing and how that positively affects Kentuckians. Sounds like it could affect positively Americans as well.
So my name is TJ Roberts, and I'm the president of Kentucky Liberty. We're an organization that's a general pro-personal freedom, pro-economic liberty group. We really arose out of the lockdowns and figured that something has to be done to get us back into a proper role of government and restoring our constitutional principles. And as we navigated the waters of Frankfurt, we just started to realize things don't get done for multiple reasons. One, we have a lack of individual involvement at the grassroots.
Right.
But second, even with our grassroots involvement, things often aren't sufficient because you have such institutionalized corruption where the political class listens to people that do not represent the interests of the public, do not represent the interests of the Constitution. And that's why this year our number one priority bill was to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. That was Representative Felicia Rayburn's bill, which was House Bill 161. This bill just simply makes it, it's essentially a Hyde Amendment for lobbying. It simply states you have a First Amendment right to lobby your government. You have a total right to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware, TJ, that under the First Amendment in the U.S. Constitution or the Bill of Rights, that you do have that right to redress grievances. And you made a great comment about navigating through what's going on in Frankfurt. Why do you think people are so detached from being involved in government, not only on the state level, but on federal level, which is why I so admire what you're doing?
I think that there's been a sense of hopelessness to where people have called their representatives. They have voted Team Red Shirt year after year, expecting change. But nevertheless, every president of my lifetime and every president of my mother's lifetime has doubled the national debt. Every single time. Has continuously trampled the Constitution in the realms of your civil liberties. And has fundamentally failed to listen to it. And that's the entire thing. there's a market when you talk about the private sector. If I don't like what a lobbying group is doing, I can just stop donating to them.
Yes.
But when you're talking about taxpayer-funded lobbyists like the Kentucky League of Cities, Kentucky Association for Counties, there's no market. They use tax dollars as their dues.
Right,
There is no
right.
means by which you, the taxpayer, can pull out of those organizations. And as a result, they lobby for bills that you fundamentally are against, whether it's gun control,
Absolutely.
tax increases. It's disgraceful, and it creates an improper incentive structure to where the political class doesn't have to listen to the
Yeah.
people from whom
Yeah.
they get their
Yeah.
power.
Or the murder industry known as the abortion
Yes.
industry. And that brings up a great point. You commented about the lockdowns that were happening a while ago, or in the last couple of years. Why did the American public, were they so quick to agree to egregious lockdowns that were illegal to begin with? And for me, TJ, it was like they were just surrendering their values to the government. Why does it seem that the American people are so quick to do that?
So I think there's a lot of reasons, and you can see it with what were the things that they came for. They came
Right.
for the faith, and they came for the family, and they came for the rest of your freedom.
Yeah,
We've seen this
yeah,
going
yeah.
back to the 1950s, where you have Dr. Robert Nisbet arguing that when you degrade the faith and you degrade the family, you
Exactly.
open up a hole in
Exactly.
people's hearts, that the only thing that can fill it is the omnipotent state. We've seen this going back to the 1950s, where you have Dr. Robert Nisbet arguing that when you degrade the faith and you degrade the family, you
Exactly.
open up a hole in
Exactly.
people's hearts, that the only thing that can fill it is the omnipotent state. And we saw that come full circle in 2020 when they shut down your very ability to make a living. And that's why I stood up. That's why I went to church on Easter Sunday. That's why I sued
Absolutely.
the governor and had his
Absolutely.
church ban struck down in federal court.
Yes, that's awesome. There was the desire to control the church ends up controlling the nation, and that's nothing new here in America. That happened back in the 1930s when Dietrich Bonhoeffer took a stand against Hitler, and people will say, well, let's forget about what happened in the past. Well, that's exactly what the left is wanting to do, to erase our past, to erase our heritage, and to make sure that we are bending our knee to the government and putting the government as the deity that's before us. Here in Kentucky, we have a governor that has abandoned his grandfather's values of being a Baptist minister, who has accepted blood money from the abortion people in order to get elected, and then he has the audacity to give tax breaks to those that want to continue, and that's your money and my money. Are you starting to see the ire of the voting population to say, wait a minute, enough is enough, and they're starting to take a stand?
I am. 2022 has been a remarkable year because there's so many incumbents getting challenged. And
Right.
on the abortion industry, Andy Beshear is bought and paid for by the abortion industry. But
No
we have to
question.
understand that it goes even further in Kentucky. Back in 2020, the legislature, which was overwhelmingly Republican, passed House Bill 99. That bill contained $35 million for a loan to the University of Louisville to purchase Jewish Hospital and to continue their training for the abortion industry at the EMW Women's Surgical Center. Almost every Republican voted for that bill. There were I think 9 who voted against it.
Wow. Surely you're not saying there's corruption running around.
Yes.
And that's sad because Kentuckians are pretty forgiving people. They want to see the best, and they seem to be. It almost seems like they're hell bent on voting for the same people that are against against family values, or they're against the church. I had a friend of mine, Brian Gibson, who took a stand along with myself. We stood against the closure of churches from the governor, and people think they have to have a big voice or a big time connection to do something, but it's the people that are just willing to stand up, isn't it? Wow, folks, we've had some great discussion tonight with some great interviews, talking with some different folks about events that are going on, from a pastor to a banker to a young man that's involved very much so in politics right here in Kentucky. if you've noticed some of the key words they were talking about people controlling the narrative for you as the voter, or the need for you to take the emotions out of the situation, or to look at things logically. And as a Christian conservative, we have to look at it through the lens of faith. We've spoken about border. We've talked about the big issues that were happening. And we were talking about a lot of variety of things. And one of the things especially that TJ made mention of, and I've got to say it like this, folks. He made mention about there seems to be a sense of hopelessness. And that sense of hopelessness can cause people either to be motivated to get engaged or to surrender their values. And I want to encourage you this evening, don't allow that sense of hopelessness to overwhelm you to the point of where you think it makes no difference what you do. It's absolutely vital that you get involved, and never allow the sense of hopelessness to overwhelm you. Well, friends, this entire show this evening has been dealing with the political arena and everything that's going on within here, especially in Kentucky. There is an increasing debt. There's issues that are going across our nation, from the Supreme Court and radical liberalism to our current president's misstep and shaking hands with air, increase of gasoline and food, and shortage of food. We should be concerned, and we should know that if we continue to vote the same leftist folks into office, we will continue to get the same results. Thanks for being with us tonight. We'll see you next week.